All right, everybody, LQ here with the LQ Review, and I'm here with a movie ranking list. So I recently rewatched Creed 2. Loved it. I love the Creed movies, both of them. I like the second one even better. Love the second one. But I recently rewatched the Creed 2, and I thought that this would be a good time while they're fresh in my brain, because I've recently actually rewatched all the Rocky movies leading up to Creed 2. So, having recently watched all the Rocky movies, I thought that I kind of just put pen to paper, kind of mapped out what my favorite ones are, 1 through 8. So there's 8 total Rocky movies. There's 6 Rocky movies. There's 2 Creed movies to make 8 total movies. And I mapped out the 1 through 8. This is going to be very controversial, but I'll have you know that this is also very scientific. And there's no possible way that you could possibly argue with my opinions, because my opinions is factual and correct. You guys are going to have different opinions. Your guys' list is not going to match mine. That's just the way it is. Movies touch people different ways. Movies affect people in different ways. And that's the same with the Rocky movies. I'm going to rank the Rocky movies differently than almost everybody on this planet. However, that being said, I do believe that probably 1 and 8 is going to be the same as most people's 1 and 8. So let's go ahead and get started here with number 8. I believe that the worst Rocky movie ever is Rocky 5. Yes, Rocky 5, and I believe that's probably going to be the one on most people's list. But was it that bad of a movie? Was it? It tried to do something different with the franchise. We had Rocky in part 4. He had basically become Superman. He had basically fought the Cold War on his own. What else was there for this man to do? He fought an indestructible foe and defeated him. The director of Rocky 5, which it might have been Stallone, I'd have to look that up, but in Rocky 5 they stripped him down. They gave him nothing again, took him back to his roots, and that made the later sequels possible. Rocky 5 was a necessary step to make the other great sequels possible. But in of itself wasn't a very good movie. There was the whole father-son dynamic. There was the whole Tommy the Machine Gun dynamic, which just didn't work. A lot of the movie didn't work. But the concept around it, I actually really liked. And I wish that the execution would have been better. But it wasn't, and it's the number 8 on the list. Number 7. It's going to make a lot of people angry, but number 7 for me is Rocky 2. Yes, Rocky 2 was great in the sense that the final fight lived up to the hype. The final fight between Rocky and Apollo lived up to the hype, and it was everything you want it to be. However, it was in a lot of ways a rehash of the first one. And because of that, I couldn't rank it any higher on the list. I love the final fight. I love some of the training scenes. I love some of the dynamics between Rocky and Mickey. But for the most part, it felt like a rehash to me, so it's lower on the list. Rocky 3 is number 6. Number 6 is Rocky 3. So I like this movie a lot. But this was when Rocky kind of took a turn, became a little cartoony. The third movie and fourth movie got a little cartoony, got a little 80s, right? Rah, 80s. But you had Mr. T in there. You had Rocky fighting Hulk Hogan in an exhibition match. You had this big, bombastic 80s movie. And that's really what Rocky was. Even right down to the music. Rocky 3 was this big, bombastic 80s movie. And it embraced the 80s and all of its glory. And if you watch it with those glasses on, Rocky 3 is a lot of fun. But for me, even having grown up in the 80s, I watch it now, and it's one of the weaker of the Rocky movies. It is. So it's number 6. Number 5 is where you guys are really going to hate me. This is going to do it. You guys are going to hate me now. But I got to be honest. For me, number 5 is Rocky 4. And Rocky 4 is going to be one that's going to be up on most people's list, right? But, Rocky 4 wasn't much of a movie if you really strip it down. It was a series of training montages and fights. is all Rocky 4 was. Very little plot, very little character development. I mean, character development was bare bones. I don't know that there was any character development for Rocky. Apollo was there just to die. Adrian was there to yell at Rocky and then support him. I mean, there wasn't much character development at all. Rocky 4 did not really progress the story anywhere from where Rocky 3 was. It was just training montages and fights. But they were great training montages, and they were great fights. So Rocky 4 lands at number 5. Number 4, for me, is Creed. I really love the legacy stories. I love legacy stories in anything. In my movies, in my TV shows, in my comic books, legacy stories really work for me. And for me, Creed was fantastic. I loved Sylvester Stallone's performance in it, how he was fighting this opponent that he couldn't fight in the ring, cancer, and how he was training this young man that he probably felt like he owed a debt to, and this young man just trying to get out from under, actually initially hiding from his father's shadow before deciding that he was going to take up the name and stand on his own. So I loved Creed. Loved it. Number 3 on my list of Rocky movies is Creed 2. Again, continuing that legacy trend, facing your father's killer. Just great stuff for me. Even Rocky going back and facing Drago. He hadn't seen Drago since the end of Rocky 4 in that ring. And what I love, what I just adore about Creed 2 is that they don't treat the Drago characters like monsters. They're not these unsympathetic villains. They're the villains, but you can relate to them. You can understand them. Drago was almost this abused soul himself, and taking his son, and there's no doubt that his son had, that Drago abused his son, but they were both trying to get out from underneath this abuse, and the only way they knew how to do it was through fighting. And man, I loved it. I loved that they didn't treat them like monstrous villains and treated them as sympathetic villains. Just great stuff. Number 2 on my list is Rocky Balboa. Loved Rocky Balboa. I love the whole idea of somebody wanting to come back and prove later in life that they still have value. I love the idea of coming back and saying there's still something left in the basement. I've got to get it out. I love the idea that they made the decision to kill Adrian. That created so much more complexity. Created a lot more of a complex situation for Rocky. It really gave him a lot more complexity as a character. Those later movies are my favorites, with the exception of one. And it was because of the situation that he's in. Stripped down to bare bones, being without Adrian, having to find meaning in life later in life, and finding his value with other people. Man, I loved Rocky Balboa. Rocky Balboa almost brought me to tears. And the speech, it doesn't matter how hard you get hit. You just got to keep on going. I love that. The speech he had with his son. Rocky Balboa is great. But number 1, as most people would probably guess, is Rocky. It's that original underdog story. It's the original story of a man standing toe-to-toe with another man and saying, I am. And the underdog who's able to stand toe-to-toe, and even if he loses, he puts on a good fight. I loved Rocky. Rocky's one of those movies where I don't necessarily think it's aged that well in terms of its production. That doesn't matter. It's still a fantastic movie. And Rocky, Rocky sits at number 1 for me for sure. So there you go. You have number 8, Rocky 5. Number 7, Rocky 2. Number 6, Rocky 3. Number 5 is Rocky 4. Number 4 is Creed. Number 3 is Creed 2. Number 2 is Rocky Balboa. Number 1 is Rocky. What's your ranking on the Rocky movies? Let me know in the comments down below. Make sure you subscribe to my channel. And as always, thank you for being here at the LQ Review, where we get to talk about all of the nerdy and geeky stuff that we just love to talk about. Until next time, we'll see you later.